I'm on the southwest edge of Clipstone Quarter this morning, and I'm on the trail of something. No, not the lonesome pine, as in the old Laurel and Hardy song. I'm on the trail of a tiny little 8-legged creature today. But it'll take some finding, and it involves going further in there and looking under a bit of bark. I'm after a false scorpion. Parts of this area were opened up a few years ago, and haloing occurred around a number of these veteran oaks. These are huge trees. That one's even wider than me. But parts of this area is in need of thinning out. I have no objection to thinning out as long as it's not done drastically. We thin out too much, certainly too much too quickly. But haloing is quite a useful thing. It does open up the floor to sunlight around the base of these famous old trees, and that does help a lot of species. Now, haloing is where trees are removed to within 5 or 10 metres of the outermost branches of ancient trees. So anything usually within a 10 metres radius of the trunk or the base of any ancient usually gets removed, and the idea is that it allows a lot more light to these ancient trees. They can continue to grow, and the theory is that it strengthens the root system. I've yet to be convinced on that. The downside, as far as I've always been concerned, is if it's opened up too much around them, that exposes them to the worst of the weather. These ancients get an enormous amount of protection from the, in inverted commas, useless silver birch around them. But the silver birch are extremely important. And these ancients in this part of Clipstone Quarter are home to an extremely rare leaf beetle. Now, the leaf beetle in question is Cryptocephalus Quirketti, which is just a small black typical leaf beetle, really. There is a closely related species, Cryptocephalus labiatus, which also occurs in this part of Sherwood Forest, but that species is more widely found throughout Nottinghamshire than Cryptocephalus Quirketti. We bred, Dillis and myself, Cryptocephalus Quirketti for a couple of years, and we only ever found it on 4 trees in this area. We used to find it on these lower branches, and it was best found by viewing from underneath and looking for the silhouette of the beetle on the leaf. It was quite a good way of finding it. We could have beat the hell out of the branches, but that wasn't our style. But the beetle bred easily, as do most leaf beetles in captivity, and we raised a number of adults. But I've never seen the adult for years. A few years ago I did find a Cryptocephalus Quirketti larval pot underneath some loose bark on one of these old trees. But despite many searches, I've never found it since. The key at the time, we always thought that these trees were offered a lot of shelter by more silver birch than what are present now. There's a degree of shelter still given, but something obviously isn't right anymore for Quirketti. If it's present at a site, it is fairly easy to find. Not so easy to determine from the similar Cryptocephalus labiatus. Just hope it is still here. I'll continue to look for it. But all searches in the intervening years from when we first found it have resulted in nothing. There are some spectacular examples of ancient oaks here. That's one there. That's a clouter. In fact, this part of the forest, it does hold some of the forest's better oaks. And a lot of them, like this one, aren't all that easy to get to. So they tend to get less damaged by members of the public. And thankfully, there's never been any grazing here, because the longhorn cattle that they use to graze in the forest can be extremely destructive to loose bark. We've got some sun. It is absolutely beautiful. I think this is one of the best Novembers I can remember. Some good and long-lasting autumn colour. The nice sort of apricot tinges that you can see are the larger pointed leaves. There's an example right lower centre of the picture, and then there's some distantly off to the left. Is a prunus. Thoroughly useless, and I'm surprised that they allow it to grow, because nothing lives on it. But as an autumn spectacle, it has quite an effect. There's one thing that all these ancient oaks in Sherwood Forest have in common. They're all completely hollow from top to bottom. But being hollow, it means they tend to get filled up by a lot of detritus. And the nests of jackdaws. That ultimately creates this. When the side of one of these oaks comes off, you get the chance to have a look at a piece of history. On the top here, we've got this year's leaves, and then as we go down, the leaves become more broken down until we get to about here, and then effectively it becomes soil. Obviously, a rich, loam-filled soil. And in there that will have accumulated probably over hundreds of years. And because these trees are hollow from the bottom to the top, they're referred to as chimneys. And it's quite apt, really. In this stuff, you can sort of take it out if you can get to it. This is one example of a tree that you can. But you can take it out, take some home, sieve it, and look for stuff, and find bugger all. In amongst what is now effectively a sandy, loamy soil, you may well be able to see these little white flecks that's in them. And they're the remains of wood lice. They're the old exoskeletons and remains of wood lice. The inside of oaks such as this is always completely bone dry. And I've took a lot of this stuff home for sampling, and I've not found anything. But it must be there somewhere. It's quite interesting to see how these trees have changed, obviously, over the course of many centuries. And certainly these ancient trees are upwards of 500 years old. Different events and limb losses and lightning strikes that have happened to them over the years turn each tree into something of an individual. This is another large tree, and to be honest, it's completely hollowed out and open in the centre, and you could probably sit two people in there with a little table and a couple of cups of coffee. It's that sort of size. But what a beautiful day. Here's another two fine examples of ancients. The one on the left, that for some reason was never haloed around. It's an absolute stunner. The one directly in the middle has had some very traumatic experiences to it in its 500 or so year history. But it's still going, it's got a good top on it. And both look absolutely fantastic in this early afternoon sunshine. I know I mention it a lot, but it's an absolutely corking day. If you've got two legs and you can walk, get out somewhere while these leaves are on, because it's a stunning spectacle. It's a lovely sky today. Not too many years ago, less than 10. This was all pine forestry, all part of a series of pine plantations. Thankfully, they've gone, and this bit of Clipstone Quarter is developing into a nice bit of typical Sherwood Forest woodland. Hard to imagine how it was, with the pines towering over you. You wouldn't have had this scene 10, 15 years ago. It's a picture. Absolutely beautiful. Even 1 or 2 ladybirds flying today. One coming in at me, which no doubt will be a harlequin ladybird. The few 7 spots that I've seen have been tucked up, which is typical for 7 spots because they do tuck themselves away quite early in the autumn. They're less prone to going wandering than harlequins, and a good place to find 7 spot ladybirds this time of year is at the end of pine shoots, at the end of the previous year's growth of pines. But you'll also find 7 spot ladybirds tucked away in the dead heads of creeping thistles and in any sort of dead rank vegetation. We found dozens wrapped up in dry dock leaves at times. Just I like counting ladybirds. Someone hadn't done for a long time, actually. Might do that. It's surprising how many you can count, even when there's snow on the ground. Looking on young pines, scrub pines, a couple of feet high, you'll be surprised how many one scrub pine can hold of 7 spot ladybirds. So, I best continue my little wander. And now there isn't a breath of wind, not even the slightest breeze. And just look at the sunlight on those trees. They're sweet chestnuts, most of them, on the right of the path. There's a couple of oaks tucked in there. But this spot holds one of the highlights of the year for me this year. The discovery of a species that I never thought I'd see in Nottinghamshire, let alone on a patch that I'd visited for 20 years. And it was a day-flying moth that was the highlight. I'm hoping in a second or two, broad-bordered beetle moth, which is about 4 feet to my right, next in on bluebells, will come onto this clump. But it doesn't seem to want to at the moment. Oh, it does. Look at that. New to Sherwood Forest, still rare in Nottinghamshire, but obviously increasing. I've had 2 today. I never thought I would see one in Nottinghamshire, and I certainly never thought I'd see one here. At this part of Clipstone Quarter there is some honeysuckle, which is a larval food plant. Hoping it might work its way back. Just see it in that clump there. So it's ideal conditions. Oh, what's it easy? Come on, this way. No. This one's been back to feed here. This is the third time that I know to in the last hour or so. But I suspect that there's certainly more than one visiting this clump. Cracking things. She's back. Ah, someone's flushed it. Never mind. I didn't think I'd be videoing these in Nottinghamshire. Broad-bordered Beehawk moth. I'm sat on the floor under a tree. But this tree has honeysuckle growing up it. And on one of several visits I made here in May, I think it was, might have been June by this time, I realised that this honeysuckle was the place to find eggs of this day-flying moth, the broad-bordered Beehawk moth. I was stunned to find it, and depending on what I edited in the clip that you've just seen, that might as well come out. And I took some eggs home to rear so I could photograph the larvae. And the resulting 4 pupa should be down here. And in the leaf litter, what I found. That is one of the 4 pupa that I put back here once I'd reared the larva. This is the pupa of the broad-bordered Beehawk moth. Nice to see that at least one has survived predation. And I put them here for a good reason. So we'll put that back in there, face upwards, and then we cover it up. I put them back here because this was the place where I found them, as caterpillars and as eggs. I think all the ones I took as eggs. But this honeysuckle that's above me was adorned with eggs, really. I thought the eggs would be an impossible find, and I found one within seconds when I first started looking. The autumn sun. How beautiful is that? God, that wren's got some rattle. I've no idea what the time is again. Does it really matter? It's gone a bit black over Bill's mothers. But luckily, I'm not heading in her direction, so I should be alright. It's been a nice little wander. I originally came to this part of Sherwood Forest with one species in mind to look for. But in the end, the forest and the weather put paid to that and gave me other ideas. It turned into a rather nice walk again. While there are still gold and yellow leaves adorning many of the trees, I suggest you get out if the weather's fine. Because no doubt, probably over the next week or so, we'll get a good storm blowing and the whole lot will be gone. And then the leaves will dry up and shrivel up on the floor, which is what I'll do if I don't get home and have something to eat. Do you know, I think I'm wasting away. I'm sure I've lost weight in my little finger and in my dreams. Well, I found it. The lonesome pine. It's here after all.